Why had she checked her medical kit 3 times that morning? She couldn't explain it. Something gnawed at her chest like a quiet warning, though she brushed it off as nerves. In Afghanistan, nerves were constant, like dust, like heat, like the crackle of radios that never really went silent. Staff Sergeant Medic for Bravo Company's 2nd Platoon had learned that order was a shield. Every bandage in place, every vial of morphine accounted for, every surgical instrument sterilized. Perfection wasn't pride, it was survival. And yet when she zipped the heavy pack and stowed it beside her seat in the armored vehicle, a shadow lingered. She learned to listen to such shadows, but not today. The convoy rolled out of Forward Operating Base Martinez at first light. 4 MRAPs, hulking, dust-colored beasts of steel crawling across the Kandahar landscape. Their mission was simple enough: deliver medical supplies to a remote outpost. A routine patrol, the kind commanders like to call secure, as though the word meant anything out here. Intelligence suggested minimal enemy activity. Still, knew better. The Taliban had a way of being exactly where reports said they were. She glanced out the tiny bulletproof window. Rocks, ravines, desolate, the kind of terrain that looked empty but could swallow men whole. She adjusted her body armor, checked her M4, then laid her hand on the aid bag. She wasn't a killer by trade, she was a medic. Her oath was simple: keep people alive. But in this war, even medics carried rifles. 2 hours into the mission, the radio crackled with Staff Sergeant's voice. Calm, clipped, carrying that undertone that veterans recognized instantly. Movement on the possible hostile observation. Maintain spacing. Eyes up. Her pulse quickened. Not fear exactly, but readiness. A tightening of the mind, the way a bowstring tightens before release. She had treated too many men who hadn't been ready when it came. She thought about her brother who'd once told her, "Out here, the fight finds you before you even realize you're in it." Then, as if the earth itself snapped open, it happened. A thunderclap beneath the lead vehicle. A buried IED detonated, and in a flash of fire and steel, 20 tons of armored truck lifted skyward like it weighed nothing. The shockwave slammed chest, rattled her teeth. Shards of metal turned into screaming projectiles, slicing through the air. "Lead down, all vehicles move, get us out of the kill zone." His voice strained through the radio. Before she could breathe, rockets streaked down from the ridges. RPGs tore into the narrow road, the world erupting in fire and smoke. Her driver gunned the engine, swerving around the burning wreckage ahead. They didn't make 50 meters before the second bomb hit. The explosion swallowed everything. Weightlessness, silence. Her body lifted clear of the seat, her med kit spinning through the air like a grotesque snow globe. She saw his face frozen mid-scream, mouth open but soundless against the ringing in her ears. The windshield shattered, revealing sky, rock, then nothing but violent spin. They were falling. The MRAP rolled into a ravine, slamming end over end. Metal shrieked. Glass burst. His left leg folded wrong beneath her. She didn't scream. There was no air in her lungs, only impact, then darkness. When her eyes opened again, it was quiet. Too quiet. Smoke hissed from twisted steel. A trickle of blood slid past her brow. She tried to move, and agony ripped through her body. Her left femur broken. Her right ankle mangled. Pain so sharp it blurred her vision. She bit her lip until she tasted copper. She croaked, but her voice was a stranger's. "You okay?" No answer. She turned her head just enough to see him slumped over the wheel, blood pooling beneath. The driver's neck bent at an angle that meant finality. In the back, Corporal stirred faintly, a gash across his head, unconscious but breathing. She should have wept. She didn't. Training didn't leave room for that. Instead, her mind began its cold work: assess, prioritize, act. Broken femur, sprained, no, fractured ankle, supplies, bag intact. Rifle, sidearm functional, radio, destroyed, options, none. Then voices. From above, men speaking Pashto, their tones casual, almost amused. Enemy fighters descending. Her chest tightened. She gripped her pistol, counted, 9 rounds, one chambered, not enough, not even close. Through the shattered glass she saw them reach the wreck. 6 men, rifles slung, eyes sharp. One dragged from the vehicle. She bit her lips so hard she tasted more blood. A single gunshot, then another. Her stomach twisted. She pressed her face into the dirt, willing herself silent, unseen, buried alive in the earth. She had carried men off battlefields, fought to keep them breathing with her hands deep in their wounds. But now she could not move, could not save, could not stop what unfolded 10 meters away. They stripped the bodies, set fire to the wreck. White phosphorus lit the ravine like a fall sun. She clutched her pistol, finger tight against the trigger, knowing if they found her, she would not let them take her alive. But they didn't. Their boots crunched past so close she could hear them spit. Then silence again. Lay in a hole in the earth with 2 broken legs, her unit dead or captured, her name already carved into the rolls of the fallen. Officially, she was KIA. Reality pressed down like the weight of the mountain above her. She was alone, she was crippled, and she was supposed to be dead. Her breath came shallow. She opened the aid bag, forced her hands steady as she splinted her own femur, wrapped her ankle. Pain clawed at the edges of her vision, but pain was just information. She repeated the mantra in her head. Pain meant she was alive. That night, as shadows swallowed the ravine, what remained. 3 days of water, 2 weeks of medical supplies if she rationed, scraps of food. No radio, no map, and 300 miles of hostile ground between her and Forward Martinez. She thought about calling out, about praying someone would hear. Then the roar of distant helicopters cut the sky. Her chest leapt. Rescue? Hope. She gripped her flare gun, then froze. The Taliban still scoured the area. To reveal herself now would be suicide, and worse, it would cost others their lives. So she stayed silent, the gun pressed to her chest, watching the aircraft vanish into the night. And in that moment made a choice. No rescue was coming. No miracle was waiting. If she wanted to live, she would have to walk home. Her legs were broken. Her spirit was not. And though she didn't know it yet, she was about to begin one of the longest, loneliest journeys any soldier had ever survived. Why hadn't she screamed when the bones snapped? Some part of her wondered as dawn broke over the jagged ridges. Maybe she had, maybe the crash had stolen her voice. Now there was only the rasp of her breath and the steady throb in her leg, pain that rolled like surf, never retreating, only breaking in waves. The sun bled across the horizon, turning the rocks gold. Beautiful, if not for the smell of burning metal drifting up from the wreck below. Smoke curled into the sky like a signal she hadn't sent. Every passing moment increased the chance that someone, friend or foe, would find it. She couldn't stay. With her splints tight and bandages clean, she began to crawl, hands digging into sand, her broken body dragging behind. Each movement was agony, each push a decision. She had treated men who'd lost limbs and begged for morphine. She understood what her injuries meant. The femur alone could kill through blood loss or fat embolism or infection. And her ankle, if it was shattered, every step would grind bone against bone. But she moved, 10 feet, rest, 10 more. When she found a shallow cave beneath a boulder, she pulled herself inside and lay still. The voices from last night haunted her ears. His execution replayed in her mind with brutal clarity. His slack body, his lifeless eyes. She should have saved him. She should have fought. But she hadn't, she had hidden. Her pistol sat heavy in her hand. She thought of his last words in the briefing. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your patients is keep yourself alive. Dead medics don't save lives. He had been right, but knowing that didn't soften the guilt. Hours passed before thirst drove her to dig out her canteen. She sipped, rationing. Water would run out first. She needed to reach a stream, needed to move. She looked down at her body, the bruises spreading like purple storms, her legs bound in improvised splints. A wreck of a soldier. And yet the determination burned bright. She would not be left to rot in a ditch. As she forced herself to rest, her mind slipped backward, to the day she first walked into the recruiter's office. "You're too small," the man behind the desk had said, studying her 52 frame like she was a misfit puzzle piece. "You'd be better in admin or motor pool." His smirk had stung more than bullets ever could. "I want to save lives on the front lines," she'd replied. Not loud, just steady. He looked at her nursing school acceptance letter, the EMT certification in her hand, and sighed. She remembered the doubt in his eyes, the same doubt she'd seen on drill sergeants' faces, on other soldiers, sometimes even in her own reflection. Too small, too fragile. They had all been wrong. But in this cave, in this broken body, the same fear whispered again. Maybe they were right all along. Maybe you don't belong here. She clenched her fists until her nails drew blood. No, this wasn't where her story ended. That night she forced herself to eat half an energy bar. The sweetness was cloying, sticking to her throat, but it gave her the strength to think, to plan. Forward Martinez was southeast, roughly 300 miles. The Taliban owned most of the ground between. She had a compass. She had basic supplies. She had 2 broken legs. But she also had training. Survival school hadn't been theory for her. She had practiced drinking from streams, navigating by stars, evading search parties. She remembered the instructor's words. "The will to live is your greatest weapon." She whispered it aloud, a mantra against the silence. "The will to live is my weapon." The next morning she began again. The crawl was endless. Dust coated her mouth. Her arms trembled, shoulders screaming from the effort. She used her rifle as a crutch, inching forward, always forward. Each time she stopped, the guilt returned, images of soldiers she'd promised to protect. She wanted to believe her survival honored them, but in truth it felt like betrayal. By the 3rd day, her water was gone. Panic clawed her chest as her lips cracked. She remembered lectures about dehydration, confusion, organ failure, death. She couldn't afford panic. She needed water. She listened harder than she ever had. The land was not silent. Birds wheeled overhead. Insects droned near certain rocks. And then a trickle, faint but real. She followed it, crawling, dragging, pulling herself by sheer will until she found a narrow stream running through a cleft. She nearly wept. Instead, she drank slowly as training dictated. Not gulps, controlled sips, enough to steady her, not drown her. She washed her wounds, cleaned her bandages, reset her splints. That night, lying beneath the stars, she thought of her father, the last hug before she shipped out. His words in Spanish, "You don't have to prove anything. You could help people without danger." She had kissed his cheek and whispered, "Papa, I need to do this." Now in the Afghan night, she wondered if she had been wrong. Days blurred, pain was constant, hunger gnawed. Yet each mile she gained became a quiet victory. Sometimes she thought she saw shapes in the shadows that moved too deliberately to be wind. Taliban patrols. She froze, pressed into dirt, heart hammering so hard she feared they would hear. And in those moments she understood what survival really meant. Not courage, not strength, but silence, stillness, the art of becoming invisible. The nights were worst. Cold seeped into her bones. Memories crept in uninvited. The soldier who'd begged her to tell his mother he loved her, the blood that soaked her gloves, the eyes that glazed over no matter how hard she fought. She carried them all. They marched with her through the dark. On the 12th night she awoke to distant gunfire, a firefight perhaps a mile away. She crawled higher, straining to see. A flash of muzzle fire lit the hills, then silence. She wanted to believe it was Americans, but she didn't move toward it. Not yet. Moving meant risk. Instead, she lay back and whispered to herself, "Stay alive. That is the mission now." The woman who had once been underestimated, dismissed, doubted, that woman was gone. In her place was something harder, stripped to the core. Each crawl forward, each sip of stream water, each heartbeat in silence was proof. She was not the medic they doubted. She was not the casualty the report claimed. She was the ghost they had left for dead. And she was walking home. What did 47 days feel like? She would wonder later. But in the beginning, survival blurred time into a haze, a crawl, a rest, a sip of water, a shallow breath. Hours became days, days became markers of pain and hunger and silence. On the 17th morning, she woke to the sound of flies, dozens of them swarming a carcass in the ravine below. The stench hit her throat like acid. She turned away, gagging, then forced herself back to look. Not at the body, it was a goat, she realized, but at the truth it offered. Where there was rot, there were people. Where there were people, there was danger. She crawled away before the sun could expose her silhouette. Moving in daylight had become a gamble. Shadows were her allies. Stars were her guides. The map she carried was only in her head. Martinez was southeast, through mountains and rivers, through valleys crawling with Taliban fighters. She imagined the base, dusty tents, tired soldiers, a mess hall where someone might complain about coffee that wasn't strong enough. Ordinary life, just far enough away to feel like another planet. Each night she pressed her palm against her chest and whispered to herself, 300 miles, just 300 miles. Her body betrayed her at every turn. Infection lurked. She cut away bandages soaked through with pus, flushing wounds with stream water, gritting her teeth against the sting. Fever came in waves, hot and merciless. She saw things in the dark that weren't there, her brother crouching beside her, his voice steady. "Come on, kid, one more push." Her father leaning against a half-built frame of wood, the smell of sawdust around him. "Come home." Sometimes she believed they were real. Sometimes she wished they were. The loneliness pressed hardest at dawn, the brief hush before the world stirred. She would watch light spill across mountains and feel the emptiness yawning wider than the valleys. She had been surrounded by brothers in arms for months, voices in the dark, laughter at chow, the constant hum of belonging. Now the silence was so deep it became a weight on her chest. She carried guilt with her as much as her medical bag. Execution haunted her. She replayed it 1,000 times. What if she had fired? What if she had drawn their attention? What if she had tried? But each what if ended the same. With her body beside his, another wasted casualty. Survival didn't erase the shame. It only deepened it. Still she moved. On the 21st night she stumbled, if crawling could be called stumbling, into a village. A cluster of mud brick homes, silent under the moonlight. She froze, heart hammering. Light flickered in one window. Voices murmured in Pashto. She crept closer, pressed against the wall, her ears straining. Children's laughter, a woman's tired tone, the scrape of metal on a cooking pot. For a moment it was almost ordinary. She thought of her own kitchen at home, her mother singing softly while cooking rice, the clatter of plates. For a heartbeat, she longed to walk through that doorway, sit at that fire, share food as if she were not hunted, not broken. But she couldn't. To step inside was to die. Her stomach twisted with hunger. She crawled past, silent as the shadows. She hated herself for the envy, for the resentment that ordinary life still existed while she fought for every breath. She remembered a line from training. The hardest part of evasion is not starvation, not wounds, not even the enemy. It's watching life continue without you. She understood now. She wasn't just outside the wire, she was outside the world. By the 29th day, her arms shook from exhaustion. The crawl had become mechanical. Pull, drag, breathe, pull, drag, breathe. Her legs were dead weight. At night she dreamed she was whole, walking tall in uniform, running with her platoon. Waking became torture, her body broken, her reality unchanged. But each dawn she told herself, one more mile, one more ridge. One night as she lay hidden beneath an outcrop, thunder rolled across the valley. No, not thunder, rotors, helicopters. Her pulse surged. She crawled to the edge, straining to see lights against the sky. American birds, or Taliban scavenged from black markets. She raised her flare gun, finger trembling, her chance, her salvation. Then she froze. Enemy patrols had taught her something. Helicopters drew attention like fire draws moths. To reveal herself meant risking more men, more lives, just to save her. She pressed the flare back down against her chest. Tears stung her eyes. She mouthed words to the empty sky, "Don't come for me. Not yet." The helicopters vanished. She was alone again. But the sound stayed with her, echoing inside. A reminder that someone might still be searching, that she wasn't forgotten, even if her name was carved on a casualty report. By day 32, the infection worsened. Her legs swelled, skin tight and angry. Fever blurred her vision. She dug trembling fingers into her kit, measuring out antibiotics, rationing them like treasure. She thought of the ER back in sterile rooms, clean tools, the luxury of light. Here, she was doctor and patient both, fighting against time with scraps. She whispered to herself, not to break the silence but to anchor her mind. Pain is information. Fear is a tool. The will to live is my weapon. By day 37, she no longer counted miles. Numbers meant nothing. Survival was now measured in breaths, in sips of water, in the way her heart still beat against her ribs. Sometimes she wondered what the others would think of her now. The men who once teased her for being too small, the commanders who doubted her strength. Would they recognize her, crawling through dust with bones splinted and skin torn? Or would they shake their heads and say the same words they'd always said, "She doesn't belong here"? She clenched her jaw. Belonging wasn't granted, it was earned. Inch by inch she was earning it. On the 42nd day she crested a ridge and froze. Below in the valley, smoke curled from another convoy ambush. Blackened steel, bodies strewn. Her heart stopped. Americans or Afghans, she couldn't tell. The sight clawed open wounds she'd tried to bury. She pressed her forehead into the dirt, sobbing silently. She couldn't save them. She could barely save herself. But when the sobs ended, something shifted. She wiped her face with a filthy sleeve and whispered, "Keep moving. For them, if not for you, keep moving." And so she did. On the 47th dawn, her arms gave out. She collapsed beside a cluster of boulders near a stream, her chest heaving. She had nothing left, not strength, not hope, just emptiness. Her hand fumbled at her pack, found the signal mirror she'd carried all this time. A useless thing, she had thought. But as the sun rose, she lifted it weakly toward the sky, angling light into the heavens. A last whisper, a final flare. And somewhere above, rotors stirred again. She didn't know it yet, but her signal had been seen. And the story that began with her crawling through a ravine would soon entangle with another. A pilot who had refused to stop searching, who had learned to trust her instincts even when the world told her otherwise. For now lay in the dirt, broken but alive, whispering the same words she'd clung to for 47 days. "I am not dead. Not yet." Why did she insist on flying the same ravine again? Her co-pilot asked with that half-skeptical, half-exhausted tone of men who had already given up on hope. 4 times they'd flown the grid. 4 times they'd seen nothing but blackened steel and silence. But Sarah wasn't ready to let go. "Something doesn't add up," she muttered, her eyes fixed on the terrain map, the valleys branching like veins across hostile country. Bodies don't vanish, and not all reports are gospel. Her co-pilot captain sighed. "Ma'am, every survivor from that ambush has been accounted for. The paperwork says KIA across the board." Sarah kept her gaze forward. She spent 2 years in Afghanistan reading the space between paperwork and truth. A field commander's tone on the radio. The hesitation in a captured fighter's interrogation. The gut feeling that numbers weren't telling the story. Call it instinct. Call it stubbornness. But more often than not, she had been right. And something about this one. The convoy ambush, the missing body, the whispers from Taliban chatter about the one who got away, gnawed at her. She banked the HH-60 Pave Hawk low over the ravine, scanning for anything out of place. Muttered something about wild goose chases, but Sarah barely heard. Her father had once told her, flying is 90% math and 10% faith. And sometimes the faith is what saves you. Faith was all she had left. The ridges rolled beneath them in shadow. Smoke had long since cleared. Scavengers had picked through wreckage, but she studied every contour with obsessive precision. A helicopter pilot's vision wasn't just mechanical, it was intuitive, reading the earth like scripture. Then a glint, barely a flicker, south of the crash site near a cluster of boulders by a stream, too faint to be random. Her crew chief leaned forward, squinting. "Ma'am, you see that? Looks like a mirror flash." Her heart kicked, not flare, not gunfire, deliberate, controlled. "Bring us around," she ordered. Hesitated. Could be Taliban bait, could be nothing. Sarah's hands were already on the stick, banking hard. Or it could be someone alive. The boulders loomed into view. She searched, eyes sharp. No movement, no figures, just stone and shadow. Then again 3 flashes. Pause, 2 flashes. Standard survival signaling, not random, not enemy, military training. She felt it then, that surge in her chest she hadn't felt in months. Someone was down there. Someone who shouldn't be. Her voice steadied as she toggled the guard frequency. "Survivor, survivor, this is Guardian Angel. If you can hear this, key your radio twice." Silence, then 2 faint clicks. The cabin went still, looked at her, eyes wide. The crew chief's jaw clenched. A voice followed, weak but steady. "Guardian Angel, this is Bravo 26 Medical, Staff Sergeant, injured but mobile, requesting immediate extraction." Sarah froze for heartbeat. The medic from the ambushed convoy, officially KIA 3 days ago, now speaking from the ground. Her chest tightened. "Bravo 26 Medical, Guardian Angel, what's your status? Can you move to an extraction point?" The reply came ragged but clear. "Broken left femur, fractured ankle, limited movement, Taliban still active, I can move but slow." Sarah met's eyes. His doubt was gone now, replaced by something harder, respect. She leaned closer to her mic, her tone calm, firm, the way she'd spoken to dozens of wounded before. "Copy that, Bravo 26. We see you. We're coming to get you. Start moving east 200 meters to open ground. We'll cover you." A pause, then's voice carrying exhaustion and defiance in equal measure. "Guardian Angel, make it fast. They're sweeping. I won't be responsible for getting your crew killed." Sarah allowed herself the smallest smile. Even broken, even hunted, was thinking about others. "Bravo 26, she said softly, "that's not your call. We don't leave anyone behind." The next 20 minutes were chaos, wrapped in precision. Sarah held her bird high enough to avoid heavy fire, low enough to watch crawl across the rocks. Her optics tracked the small figure dragging herself inch by inch, weapon slung, pack still clutched tight. Every movement screamed pain, but the medic didn't stop, not once. Her crew chief called out enemy patrols shifting nearby. Sarah maneuvered, keeping the helicopter unpredictable, drawing eyes upward instead of downward. Sweat slid down her back as she threaded the bird between ridges, every instinct screaming about the thin line between rescue and ambush. "Come on, Sergeant," she whispered, eyes locked on Scrawl. "You've made it this far, just a little more." Finally, the medic reached the clearing. She raised her arm in signal, face pale but eyes sharp. Sarah dropped the Pave Hawk into the zone with surgical precision, rotors whipping dust into a storm. The crew chief leapt down, pulling aboard. Sarah stole one last glance as the doors sealed. The woman was broken, splints, bandages, skin gray with fever, but her eyes were alive. As they lifted, caught Sarah's gaze through the cockpit glass. She raised her chin just slightly in acknowledgement. Not thanks, not surrender, just recognition. Sarah felt something stir in her, respect, kinship, a reflection of herself. Because she knew what it was to be doubted. To be told she didn't belong in combat, didn't have the strength, the resolve. And like she had built her career not by proving them wrong, but by surviving again and again when others would have given up. As the bird raced toward the field hospital, Sarah let herself breathe. The mission was done. Against every odd, against every report, they had pulled a ghost from the earth. But she knew this was not the end of story. Survival was one test, living with it would be another. And in the quiet between rotor thumps, Sarah felt a strange certainty. Their paths weren't finished crossing. Why did the ceiling feel like a cage? White tiles, perfect lines, sterile light that hummed just enough to keep her awake. Blinked, groggy from anesthesia, the smell of antiseptic replacing the dust and blood of Afghanistan. She tried to sit up, pain lanced through her leg like lightning, forcing her flat again. Her hands moved automatically, searching for her weapon, her aid bag, anything that anchored her to the field. Nothing. Just IV lines in her arms, monitors beeping in rhythm with her heartbeat. She was alive, and that truth, instead of relief, landed like a weight on her chest. A voice broke the silence, "Staff Sergeant." She turned her head, slow, heavy. A woman stood at the bedside, white coat, clipboard, eyes that had seen this conversation before. "I'm Doctor," the surgeon said, her tone steady, professional. "We repaired your femur, stabilized the ankle. You'll walk again with time and therapy." Swallowed her throat raw. "And the army." The doctor hesitated. That pause told everything before the words landed. "You'll regain mobility, but not to military standards. Running, load-bearing, anything high impact will risk re-injury. You'll always have pain. The hardware in your leg is permanent." Permanent, the word struck harder than any bullet. Doctor adjusted the monitor, her face softening but her voice stayed clinical. "You've served with distinction. You'll receive full medical retirement benefits, but your combat career is over." Over? The word echoed. She closed her eyes. Images surged, crawling through dust with splints digging into her skin, dragging herself across ravines, whispering mantras to survive. All of it for this. A bed, a label, a discharge stamped in ink. Her chest tightened. She had survived the impossible, but survival, it seemed, wasn't enough. In the weeks that followed, recovery became its own battlefield. Physical therapy sessions blurred together. Sterile rooms, mats that smelled faintly of disinfectant, the metallic clink of exercise equipment. Each session was a war fought in inches, lifting her leg, bending the knee, forcing muscles to obey. Sweat soaked her shirt, tears sometimes slipped, but she never let the therapist see her break. Captain, her therapist, was different. He'd lost his own arm in an IED blast years earlier, his prosthetic glinting as he adjusted her crutches. He never coddled her, never looked at her with pity. He said during one brutal session, his voice low but sharp, "You're fighting the wrong battle." She gritted her teeth, pushing through another agonizing bend. "I'm fighting to get back." Back, his eyes narrowed. "That version of you is gone. You keep chasing her, you'll drown in frustration. The question isn't how to be who you were. The question is, who are you now?" She hated him for it. But later, lying in her bunk staring at the ceiling tiles, she realized his words weren't cruelty. They were truth. The Army's Medical Evaluation Board confirmed it weeks later. The conference room felt colder than any hospital. A line of officers flipping through her file, speaking as if she weren't there. Words like disability rating, non, retirement with honors. One of them looked up at last. "Staff Sergeant, your service has been exemplary, but your injuries prevent further duty. Effective immediately, you're retired." She saluted out of reflex, her face blank. Inside, something cracked. Walking out of that room, she felt less like a soldier and more like a ghost. Alive, breathing, but erased. Back in home didn't feel like home. Civilian streets felt strange, too quiet after years of convoys and gunfire. Family hugged her, friends whispered how proud they were, but their eyes betrayed what they didn't say. She was changed. She tried jobs, hospital technician, medical sales, even retail. None fit, none mattered. She would stand in grocery aisles and catch herself scanning rooftops for snipers, hear a car backfire and feel her pulse spike. Ordinary life had become a foreign language. Her father noticed. One night at a barbecue, as laughter rose around them, he set down his beer and looked at her with that calm weight only fathers carried. He said, voice low, "You talk about jobs like they're punishment. What do you want?" She opened her mouth to recite the usual answer: stability, career, normal life. But the words crumbled before they left. What she wanted was simple, dangerous, and unchanging. "I want to save lives," she whispered. "I want my work to matter." Her father nodded, the corners of his mouth lifting. "Then stop chasing what doesn't." Those words lodged in her chest, burning, refusing to fade. Weeks later, searching online late at night, she found it. A training initiative teaching civilian first responders the combat techniques military medics used under fire. Tactical combat casualty care. Something clicked. She applied, they accepted, and for the first time since Afghanistan she felt a flicker of purpose. Her first class was a group of paramedics from a high-crime neighborhood. Hardened faces, skeptical eyes. She introduced herself, her limp obvious, her medals irrelevant. "I know some of you are wondering why you're learning from a soldier," she said, her voice steady. "The answer's simple. The things we learned in combat save lives when everything goes wrong, and that's exactly what you face out there." For 8 hours she taught them tourniquets, wound packing, casualty triage under fire. But more than skills, she gave them what she'd carried through 47 days alone: calm under chaos. "The difference between a good medic and a great one," she told them, "isn't skill. It's the ability to breathe when everyone else panics, to choose action when fear screams freeze, to know you won't save everyone but never stop trying." By the end of the day, their skepticism had shifted. Paramedics who had doubted her now asked questions, stayed late, thanked her quietly. One said, "You made me believe I can handle the calls I used to dread." Driving home that night, she felt something she hadn't in years. Not pride, not triumph, something quieter, something deeper: purpose. The army had taken her uniform, but not her calling. She was still a medic, still saving lives. And though she didn't know it yet, the world would call on her again, because war had a way of finding those who refused to quit. Why did the phone ring at 2:47 a.m.? Jolted awake, the room still wrapped in restless darkness. The number flashed across her screen: Washington, D.C. Her stomach tightened. No one called from D.C. by accident. She hesitated, then answered, her voice instinctively sharp, military, as though she'd never left uniform. The line crackled, then a man's voice, steady, urgent, unmistakably official. "This is Colonel Martinez, Pentagon Special Operations. We have a situation. How fast can you get to Air Force Base?" Her heart thudded. "Sir, I'm retired, medically, you know that." "I know. I also know you've spent the last year training first responders, revolutionizing combat casualty care for civilians. Right now, we need that expertise." She swung her legs over the bed, her old injury flaring as her foot touched the floor. "What kind of situation?" 12 American aid workers taken hostage in Somalia. Intelligence suggests several are wounded. The captors are demanding supplies, using their injuries as leverage. Rescue is all ready, but the team needs medical training fast. They'll have to treat casualties under fire. That's your specialty. For a long moment, silence filled the line. She stared at her reflection in the window, hair tangled, scars peeking beneath her shirt. She built a new life, found purpose again. But under the surface, the soldier in her had never died. She inhaled slowly. "How much time do I have?" 18 hours. The team's assembling at Fort. You'll brief them en route." Her pulse surged. 18 hours, that was all. "Copy," she said quietly. "I'll be there." She hung up, already moving. Not with excitement, not even with fear, but with the old, familiar clarity that came when lives hung in balance. By sunrise she was climbing into a transport jet loaded with gear she once thought she'd never touch again. The flight felt like a tunnel back into a world she had sworn she'd left behind. At Fort the air hummed with urgency. Operators moved like shadows, checking weapons, tightening gear, their faces stone. These weren't recruits. These were the best: Delta, SEALs, Rangers, men who had stared death down and walked away. Major, the mission commander, met her at the hangar. His handshake was firm, his expression unreadable. "Sergeant, we've got 12 operators. They know first aid. They don't know how to keep hostages alive while bullets are flying. That's where you come in." She nodded, scanning the faces of the men waiting. Some skeptical, some curious. She knew that look. She'd worn it herself once before experience had ground it away. She stepped forward, her limp obvious but her voice strong. "You're about to attempt something no one's ever done: pull hostages out while performing advanced trauma care in combat. You've got minutes to make decisions that mean life or death. What I teach you in the next 6 hours could be the difference between every one of those hostages coming home or not." The room quieted, doubt flickered into attention. She began with the basics: tourniquets, pressure dressings, wound packing. But her tone wasn't clinical. It was sharp, urgent, alive with the weight of memory. She showed them how to improvise under fire, how to think like medics when they were anything but. One soldier, sergeant, raised his hand. "Doc, we're not medics. We don't have your calm. What happens when adrenaline takes over?" Met his gaze steady. "Then you breathe, you slow your hands. You remember the person under your care is someone's son, someone's daughter. Panic is contagious. So is calm. Be the calm." They practiced under simulated stress, alarms blaring, lights flashing, instructors shouting. She forced them to treat mock patients while gunfire crackled over speakers. At first they fumbled, but soon movements sharpened. Decisions sped up. She watched them with something close to pride. Warriors learning not just to fight, but to save. By hour 5, sweat dripped down their faces, but their eyes burned with focus. She knew then they were ready. Not perfect, no one ever was, but ready enough. As they geared up for departure, Major pulled her aside. "You've given them a chance. That's all we can ask." She nodded, but inside a storm raged. She wasn't going with them. She'd train them, then wait. And waiting was worse than combat. That night, as they boarded their transport to Somalia, she stood on the tarmac, wind whipping her hair, heart pounding with something she hadn't felt since Afghanistan: helplessness. She whispered to herself, "Bring them home, all of them." Hours bled into eternity. She sat in the operations room, headset on, listening to fragments of comms from half a world away. Gunfire, shouts, codes and coordinates. Then finally the words she had prayed for: all hostages secure, multiple casualties stabilized, extraction successful. She slumped in her chair, tears spilling unbidden. They had done it. They had used her training, and 12 Americans were alive because of it. Later, Major sought her out. His face, usually carved from stone, softened. "What you gave them saved lives, never doubt that." She nodded, but her mind was already elsewhere, because she knew this was not the end. The Pentagon had called once. They would call again. And though she was no longer a soldier in uniform, war had marked her. She belonged to it still, in ways she had yet to understand. Why was the briefing room so quiet? Felt every eye on her as she entered, leaning slightly on her cane, her uniform replaced now by civilian clothes. She wasn't supposed to be here, not in the Pentagon, not in a secure conference filled with brass and intelligence officers. And yet, there she was. At the far end of the table, General Harper cleared his throat. "Staff Sergeant," he stopped himself, corrected. "Sit down." The title stung, the reminder that she was no longer Army, but she said nothing, settling into the chair, her gaze steady. The general clicked a remote and a map of Somalia glowed on the wall. 12 Americans, all alive. The rescue team credits your crash course training for that outcome. The president himself asked who taught them. Your name came up. Murmurs rippled. Sat still, her face calm, but inside her chest ached. Recognition wasn't what she had wanted. All she had wanted was for those men and women to come home breathing. Harper continued. We've run the numbers. With your methods, battlefield survivability increases by 40%. That is unheard of, which is why we're expanding the program. You'll teach across units, special forces, rangers, marines. Every operator who goes forward will carry your lessons. He paused. But that's not all. There's a new mission developing. Syria, hostages again. Intelligence suggests casualties already. We don't just need a teacher this time, we need someone on the ground. The words hung in the air like a blade. His pulse quickened. Sir, she said slowly, I'm retired. You know my medical file. Harper leaned forward, eyes sharp. We're not asking you to fast-stroke from helicopters. We're asking you to do what you've already proven no one else can, keep people alive under fire. There'll be a combat medic with the team, yes, but no one has your blend of experience. You survived 47 days alone behind enemy lines. You taught ordinary operators how to function as medics. You turned training into survival. That's not in any manual, that's you. The silence deepened. His mind flashed backward, dust choking her throat, pain burning in her leg, the whisper of boots searching for her in the dark. She had promised herself she'd never go back, promised her family, promised her own broken body. And yet, she thought of Somalia, 12 faces alive, 12 families spared grief. She thought of her students, the firemen, paramedics, soldiers, who had told her she'd given them courage. Was she really done, or had she just been waiting? I'll need time, she said softly. Harper nodded. We don't have much. The mission window is short, think hard. That night sleep eluded her. She sat on her balcony in the desert stretching under moonlight. The city's hum was faint, almost tender, but her thoughts were loud. She remembered the convoy ambush, the smell of blood and fire. Remembered the 47 days when every breath was borrowed. Remembered Sarah's eyes through cockpit glass the day of her rescue, recognition, not pity. She whispered into the night, am I willing to walk back into it? Her phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. They stayed loosely connected since Afghanistan, messages now and then, unspoken understanding in each one. Heard they're trying to pull you back. Don't decide out of guilt. Decide because you still believe. Stared at the words, simple, clear, and true. The next morning she called Harper. I'll go, but I'm not a soldier anymore. I'm not carrying a rifle. My weapon is medicine. If you can accept that, I'm in. There was a pause, then Harper's voice almost relieved. That's exactly why we want you. The weeks that followed blurred. Training ramped up again, though this time it wasn't her teaching. It was her preparing, brushing up on advanced trauma protocols, integrating with the assault team, learning the layout of the compound where hostages were held. Her limp drew some curious looks, but when she outlasted even seasoned operators in casualty simulations, calm, precise, relentless, their doubt evaporated. One ranger whispered afterward, if I get hit out there, I want her over me, not anyone else. The night before deployment, stood in the hangar, staring at the helicopter she would ride into Syria. Her hand traced the cold steel. She remembered the last bird she'd climbed aboard, broken, carried from the dust by Sarah's crew. This time, she would step into fire by choice. Fear pulsed in her chest, but beneath it something steadier, resolve. In the mirror of the hangar's window, she saw herself not as the wounded medic crawling through dirt, not as the retired soldier drifting between jobs, but as what she had always been, a lifeline. The mission would test her in ways she couldn't yet imagine. It would take her closer to death than she had ever been. But tonight, on the edge of war again, she whispered the words that had carried her once before. Pain is information, fear is a tool, the will to live is my weapon. And tomorrow she would wield it not for herself, but for others who had no one else. Why was the night so quiet? The question pulsed through as she crouched inside the helicopter, rotors thundering above, the team silent around her. Missions usually had noise, radio chatter, last-minute adjustments, nervous jokes. Tonight there was only stillness, the kind of stillness before a storm breaks. Her hands moved without thought, checking her pack, counting the supplies again. Tourniquets, bandages, airway kits, morphine. Enough to keep people alive, maybe. Never enough to stop death itself. Major's voice cut through the cabin. 30 minutes to LZ. Targets inside compound. Expect heavy resistance. Stay sharp. The men nodded, stayed still, her pulse steady. She wasn't here to fight. She was here to catch the lives that slipped through the cracks. But she knew if things went wrong, her presence wouldn't just be symbolic. It would be the difference. The helicopter dipped low, skimming darkness. The desert spread beneath them, endless and black. Thought of Afghanistan, the crawl, the dust, the stars. How strange that life had brought her back to a place that smelled the same, felt the same, though the name on the map was different. The ramp dropped, they spilled into night. The assault team moved like shadows, rifles up, boots silent. Stayed close to the rear, every step calculated, her limp heavier under the weight of her pack. Adrenaline dulled the ache but sharpened her mind. Gunfire cracked. Shouts in Arabic rose from the compound. The storm had broken. The first breach was fast, doors splintering, men flooding rooms. Pressed into the wall, heartbeat quick. A call came through the radio. One hostage secured, minor injuries. Relief flickered, but it lasted seconds. Man down. We've got a man down in Sector 2. Her legs moved before thought. She sprinted, or something like it, toward the call, gear slamming against her back. Inside a dim corridor, she found him. A ranger on the ground, blood pooling from his thigh, arterial bright. His buddy had his hands pressed down, eyes frantic. "Doc, he's bleeding out." "I've got him." She dropped to her knees, fingers steady despite the chaos. Tourniquet high on the leg, twist, twist, bleeding slowed. She packed gauze into the wound, pressure unrelenting. The ranger groaned, tried to push her away. "Stay with me," she ordered, her voice calm, commanding. "You're not done yet, breathe." Behind her, gunfire hammered, but she didn't flinch. Her whole world narrowed to the wound, the pulse beneath her hands, the soldier's fatting eyes. Seconds stretched, then the bleeding stopped, his pulse steadied. She exhaled, only now realizing she'd been holding her breath. "Get him to extraction," she told his buddy. "He's going home." As they dragged him out, she turned toward another shout. Hostage critical in the West Wing." She ran again, chest heaving. The room was chaos, operators exchanging fire through broken windows, smoke curling. In the center lay a young woman, pale, blood soaking her shirt from a chest wound. Dropped beside her, the hostage's breath rattled shallow, a sucking chest wound. She ripped open her kit, sealed the wound with an occlusive dressing, pressed her ear close. Breath still labored, tension pneumothorax. Her hands moved without hesitation, needle decompression, a hiss of trapped air escaping. The woman gasped, air rushing in, life clawing back. His eyes met hers. Terrified, fragile human, squeezed her hand. "You're going to see tomorrow." The firefight pressed closer. His voice shouted, "We're in 3 minutes, move." Operators grabbed the hostage, carrying her out. Followed, lungs burning. Bullets cracked against stone, sparks showering. She ducked but kept moving, kept her eyes on the people she'd sworn to protect. At the extraction zone, the helicopter thundered back into view. One by one, they loaded hostages and wounded. Climbed aboard last, dragging herself in as the bird lifted into the night sky. The cabin was chaos, hostages crying, soldiers grimacing through wounds, medics working by dim red light. And in the middle knelt, her hands steady, her voice calm. Tourniquets adjusted, airway checked, fluids flowing. Not a soldier, not anymore, but every inch the medic she was born to be. Hours later, back at the forward base, the mission debrief blurred. Numbers, timelines, protocols, barely heard. Her focus was on the faces, 12 hostages alive, soldiers battered but breathing. She sat on a cot outside the medical tent, the desert cold biting through her shirt. Her hands shook now, the adrenaline gone. She stared at the blood under her nails, the stains on her clothes. Sarah appeared, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. She'd flown Overwatch on the mission. Her presence, like a shadow, hadn't known was there. "You did it again," Sarah said softly. Shook her head. "No, we did." Sarah studied her, then nodded. "Still, no one else could done what you did." Looked back at the stars, the same ones she'd crawled beneath for 47 days. She thought of every soldier she couldn't save, of every face she still carried. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "Sometimes I think survival isn't about strength. It's about carrying the weight of those you couldn't bring back and still walking forward." Sarah didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence between them was enough. When finally returned home, the world was unchanged. Traffic lights, grocery aisles, the smell of coffee in the morning. But she was not the same. She walked slower, but she walked with purpose. She taught more, trained harder, poured everything she knew into others. And when people asked why she kept going back, why she risked what little she had left, she never gave speeches. She only said, "Because lives matter, even one." Her story spread quietly, among soldiers, among medics, among the ones who knew what it meant to survive when survival wasn't supposed to happen. And in time, she realized the truth she'd been searching for since that day in Afghanistan. Dignity doesn't speak. It doesn't shout or demand recognition. It simply acts.